On today's episode of DeRaud-Messinger Show, was the 2023 Texas Longhorns football season a success? Dylan and I give us our recap of the 2023 season and whether it lived up to our expectations. Dylan, I know we do tend to have some lofty expectations, but only because we're, given realistic standards, Dylan. We're not going to be pushovers here. But Longhorns fans, don't forget to like and subscribe, please. It's greatly appreciated. And check us out at HornSports.com for all the latest in Texas news. We're a Twitter favorite to follow as well. But Dylan, to quote the other guys, David Ershon, just to begin this video, I think the best way to tell the story is by starting at the end briefly, then going back to the beginning, and then periodically returning to the end. So to do that,
Yes.
of
Yes.
course, the end of the story for Texas fans briefly was a trip to the college football playoff. Dylan, something that I don't think most Texas fans were confident that was going to happen, just given the lack of success, A, in the postseason, but B, in even getting to the postseason in some aspects in terms of a Big 12 championship game. Texas not only did that, they made it to the playoff and nearly beat Washington. But Dylan, Washington, to be honest and truthful, is in a whole different another sphere right now. One that Texas hopes to get to soon, but in the end was not in their cards this season. Now to get back to the beginning, Dylan, in terms of our flashback, what were your preseason expectations for this team?
Is this briefly or is this periodically?
This is briefly. We'll periodically
This
get
is
to the
briefly.
end.
Okay. So briefly, Devin, I think our expectations were pretty solid. I think at least my expectations were competing for a Big 12 championship game, and they did that. Obviously, they made it, and then as well as beating one of the two in Bama and Oklahoma. They beat Bama, lost Oklahoma, made to the Big 12 championship game. So there was a lot to like, and they won the Big 12 championship game, which I did not expect them to do. So they exceeded expectations. I think they were a year ahead of where they should be, and that's getting to the college football playoff. So, and you kind of saw it in the sense of there were still the inconsistency parts and parts of the defense and offense that, given time, I think will be in a better spot for Texas. But yeah, Devin, to answer your question, I think they definitely exceeded expectations.
Just to recap my expectations as well prior to the year. Dylan, I was also in the same boat. I was thinking Texas would go 10-2, winning or getting to the Big 12 championship. They did both of those by a wide margin, Dylan. The regular season ended up being 11-1. Like Dylan, I had either Alabama or Oklahoma being a loss. And then I thought they'd drop a game to someone, between Oklahoma and the season finale. They did not do that, which is a testament to this team. After that Oklahoma loss, they didn't give up on national championship goals, Dylan. And it was not a fun locker room to be around after that Red River game. Let me tell you, there was not a lot of high spirits in there, and I don't disagree with why. But they ended up getting to the Big 12 championship game, as Dylan mentioned, which was my expectation. And I said winning it, of course, would be the next thing. They did that. And then from there on out, Dylan, it was a cherry on the top of the cake, or whatever the saying is at this point in time. My mind's going blank on the saying. But Texas got to the playoff, which Dylan and I were saying would be, just that excess. They did that. They nearly got to the championship game. I think it would be very fair to say that this season was a success.
Yeah.
And yet again, just met a team that, Dylan, at the end of the day, was better than them. The hard part, though,
And that's yeah.
just briefly, the hard part about that is I agree with you in saying that they were a year ahead of their time. The difficult part about that is with all the pieces that are going to be gone, next season might not be as fruitful in terms of the overall success, which we will discuss as the offseason rolls on, Dylan. But should we look at some of our preseason questions to briefly go back to the beginning as well?
Yeah.
Dylan, the first question I have for you in terms of a recap of the season, at the time it was, can Quinn Ewers take the next step? With
Yes.
knowing what we do now, did Quinn Ewers take the next step in 2023 in proving that he can be a Heisman contender and, more importantly, the leader of a Longhorns team that can make, big noise in the playoff?
Yeah, he totally proved that, and he proved that in big moments too. Down to the wire when Kansas, not the Kansas State, because that was Malik Murphy, but in key moments against Oklahoma State, they came out early and they hit them right. They hit them quick, and again as well against Texas Tech, where you got Texas Tech talking about how they're going to give that final send off that Texas deserves out of the Big 12 with the commissioner there. They delivered, right? So it was big moments that I think he came up big in and did take that step, big next step, because consistency was the biggest thing. And yeah, I do believe he did that.
Dylan, just all the stats pretty much improved for Ewers, and of course, quarterback position is more than just stats. But the important one that we talked about in the preseason was, could that completion percentage increase?
Yeah.
It increased by nearly 10%. The yardage, touchdowns, and just all the per game stats increased. Ewers also, most importantly, even more than maybe the completion percentage, was more consistent with his play. There were drives and spurts of the games, Dylan, where he just didn't have it. But seemingly at some point in every game, it turned back on for him, which in the year prior, there was some games where if he didn't have it, it just wasn't going to happen. He did prove that he could get himself out of a rut this season. Of course, for next year, we'd like to see more consistency from him. But I think it would be foolish to say that he did not improve, and I think Texas fans should be happy with what he became this season. But of course, with higher goals for the next year. The next one, Dylan, can the running back core come together after losing Bijan and Roschon? Do you think they did?
Oh, they definitely did. And I would even say, I wouldn't say more so than the production you got out of Bijan and Roshan, but what you saw with how they were able to play and um, Jonathan Brooks being one of the best running backs in the nation, and then as well as you got a backup running back in CJ Baxter, who's only a freshman. They got very close to the production that you lost with Bijan leaving to the NFL. And again, Brooks was a key factor in a lot of those wins and what he was able to do in the running game, but also the passing game.
Brooks, of course, just unfortunate injury at the end of the year. Otherwise, I think he's winning that Doak Walker Award for the best running back in the nation, which is a testament to how well the running back core did come together. And then CJ Baxter in blue, of course. Also surprising years, I'd say, just given the inexperience. But of course, the group as a whole is inexperienced. But those guys really didn't miss a beat, I would say, Dylan. Of course, Brooks was at a Doak Walker Award level, but those guys, in terms of production, were just right up there as well. I think this was definitely maybe the most promising group in terms of expectations from preseason to after the season. But there are some other groups, such as the defensive line, that you could probably talk about being similar. But even the defensive line, the expectations were pretty darn high, and they still exceeded that. So definitely was an element and an ingredient in terms of Texas needing to have a good season and having a good season, and they did just that. The next one, which maybe was the essential ingredient, Dylan, can the defense take another step up? How do you think they did holistically? Of course, some parts not so pretty, some parts were the Mona Lisa of paintings, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, when you talk about this team, especially if you were looking at it from like the opponent's perspective, it's you're not going to be able to run the ball on Texas, and that was a key factor as well, just being the best team against the run, arguably in the college football playoff. So with that, their defense was one of the best, and I would say upgraded in a lot of facets. Where you started to tail off a little bit was experience in the linebacking core, other than Jalen Ford, and then in the secondary. Now you can talk about the defensive line, the pressure that they were able to get up front, especially from the edge. But that secondary, when you look at the stats, especially like college football reference, towards the bottom half just nationally. So there's a lot. I would say it's a defense with a lot of strong points, but enough of a weakness that a team could put it together and really move the ball on them. And then you saw that in the college football playoff. So I would say they were better than last year, Devon. But again, it was like one facet of it that got extremely better, and then the others either stayed the same or kind of fell off just a little bit.
I think that's a good caution point to note. I do think this defense did get better. There were several games, especially during that tough stretch where Ewers was out, that the defense kind of won those games for Texas, or at least kept the Longhorns in the game during the first half of many contests before the offense decided to wake up, and of course ended up being a 11-1 regular season. But Dylan, the secondary, of course, was the issue. I wouldn't even say bottom half in most stats, Dylan. I think that even might be generous. Of course, near the bottom in many important stats. other than turnovers, surprisingly enough, the Longhorns were quite good in the interception category this season, which if you're going to not be too great in terms of yardage allowed, definitely going to need to make up some ground in the turnover column. They did that. Edge pressure definitely needed some tweaking in the improvement category, Dylan. But defensive front and the linebackers overall did a good job of steadying the ship and giving Texas a chance to win many games. So I do go with the improvement, but I agree with Dylan here. Maybe not the biggest improvement that you would like to see. And the funny part, Dylan, is next year the secondary might perform better, but just expectations-wise, the defensive front, losing Sweat, losing Murphy, that's just going to be a tough pill to swallow for PK's defense. And lastly, this is a question we already answered, but we just need to celebrate it. Can the Longhorns win their first conference championship since 2009? Our expectations for the Longhorns yet again were to at least get there. We were, in our eyes, it would be a failure if Texas managed to fall just short of that. They got there, Dylan. They did their thing, as you said, Ewers against a state team, Oklahoma State that was, did his thing and ended up pushing Texas just barely. But Dylan, in the end of the day, a win's a win, just barely into the college football playoff. And of course,
all that matters.
Of course, the all that matters for the big hopes and dreams was a college football championship. Did Texas fall short of that? Yes. But with that being said, was it realistic to have been hoping for that? Dylan, I think in some regard, yes, because they were a good team. And I said in the preseason video that they had the potential to get to a championship and to win it. But I did say that consistency had haunted them before, and that's what we were needing to see out of them to win it again. In the end, that's really what haunted them this season. But even though I say that, Dylan, the team lost 2 games. So that shows you that they were pretty consistent. Go ahead.
And they showed just making it to the college football playoff, where I know there was probably some worry in Texas fans' minds that they would be the ones to not make it in with Georgia losing to Alabama. But they showed that they did belong. Even losing to Washington, they stuck in that game and proved that they were at least a top 5 team nationally. Because I know Georgia waxing Florida State.
Georgia took Florida State to the woodshed.
Yeah, tough one. Again, Florida State, not all their players are playing, though, in fairness to them. But, Georgia did have a case in a way.
Yeah, I think the same went for Georgia, too, though. Not as extreme as Florida State, but yeah, that was ugly. TCU flashbacks over there going on.
We don't need to talk about that.
But more importantly than our thoughts on whether the season was a success, I think it was. But do you guys think the Longhorns met the expectations of the preseason? Let us know down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, have a great rest of your day.